The leader of the Royal King's Motorcycle Club, a man they called Prez, was about to put his helmet on when he heard it. A child's scream. A small 9-year-old boy, barefoot and his face stained with tears, sprinted out of an alley and grabbed onto Prez's leather jacket. "Please, you have to follow me. He's hurting my mom." Prez held up a hand to calm him. "Whoa, son, slow down. We'll call 911. We'll get the police." The boy's eyes widened with pure terror, and he shook his head violently. "I did. I called 20 minutes ago. They won't come." The boy's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "He's one of them." The bikers all exchanged a dark, knowing look. They weren't just being asked to help. They were being asked to go to war. They followed the boy into the darkness, having no idea that by morning their actions wouldn't just save a family, they would expose a conspiracy that would shock the entire city.
Dusk. That purple, in-between time when the world holds its breath, waiting for the night. On the frayed edge of the city, in the chemical yellow glare of a last-chance gas station, the Royal King's Motorcycle Club was doing a ritual as old as the club itself. They were refueling, their 8 bikes lined up like a row of sleeping iron beasts. They were a sight. Intimidating was a weak word for them. These were not weekend warriors. They were all black, all built, all wearing the same Royal King's cut, a leather vest bearing the crest of a crowned lion, a symbol that, in this part of the city, meant respect. A mother in a beat-up minivan, pumping gas across the way, nervously locked her car doors, her eyes fixed on them. The teenage cashier inside, behind his plexiglass shield, was pretending not to watch. The Kings didn't care. They were in their own world. Prez Elijah, the club president, was leaning against a pump, laughing. He was a man in his late 40s, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much. His laugh was a low, warm rumble. Standing next to him was his second-in-command, a mountain of a man named Sarge Mike. Where Prez was the club's mind, Sarge was its heart, and its fist. "I'm just saying," one of the younger members, Rook, was arguing, "that there's no way you beat him in an arm wrestle, Sarge. Not in his prime." Prime. Sarge's voice was a deep bass that seemed to shake the concrete. "Boy, I'm always in my—" He stopped. The laughter died. Prez's head snapped up. It was the sound of a child's wail. A thin, desperate, terrified sound. The hell was that? Rook asked, looking around. And then they saw him. He sprinted out of the darkness from the residential street across from the gas station. He wasn't a shadow, he was a wound. A small boy, maybe 9 years old, his frame impossibly tiny. He was wearing a t-shirt 3 sizes too big and a pair of torn pajama bottoms. He was barefoot. His small feet slapped, wet and frantic, on the oil-stained pavement, leaving tiny dark footprints. He didn't run from the bikers. He ran to them. He didn't slow down. He didn't ask for help. He ran full tilt, his eyes locked on the biggest man he could see, and slammed his tiny body into Prez's legs, grabbing the leather vest with both hands. "Please!" he screamed, his voice cracking with a terror that was absolute. "Please, you have to help. You have to help now." The bikers froze. The mother in the minivan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Prez, his voice suddenly gentle, put his hands on the boy's trembling shoulders. "Whoa, son. Whoa. Slow down. You're okay. What's wrong? Where are your parents?" He's hurting my mom," the boy sobbed, his face a mask of tears and dirt. "He's hurting her bad. Please, you have to come." Prez and Sarge exchanged a look. This was not their business. This was a 911 call. "Okay, son." "It's okay," Prez said, his voice calm, trying to de-escalate. "What's your name?" "Leo," the boy choked out. "Okay, Leo. We're gonna get you help." "Sarge, call the cops. We'll call 911. Prez reached into his pocket for his phone, but the boy's reaction was immediate and violent. "No." Leo screamed the word with such force it made Prez flinch. He grabbed Prez's jacket again, his small fingers digging into the leather like claws. "No cops. Please." "I did. I called." "What are you talking about, son?" Sarge asked, his own phone in his hand. "I called them." Leo cried, his body shaking. "I called 20 minutes ago. I told them he was hitting her. I told them. And they said it wasn't an emergency. They said they'd send a car when they could. They won't come." Prez's blood ran cold. He knelt, forcing himself to be eye level with this terrified child. "Leo, why wouldn't they come?" Leo looked over his shoulder, back into the darkness he'd just run from. He was crying so hard he could barely breathe. He turned back, and his voice dropped to a desperate, broken whisper. A whisper that would haunt every man there for the rest of his life. Because he's one of them. The words hung in the night air, heavier than the humidity. He's one of them. The Royal Kings, a club of black men in a city that had given them no quarter, understood what that meant. They understood it in their bones. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a conspiracy. This was the system protecting itself. Sarge slowly, deliberately, put his phone back in his pocket. His face was a mask of thunder. "Prez," Sarge said, his voice a low growl. "This ain't our business. This is 5-0. This is a setup. We get involved in this, we're the ones in cuffs. Or worse." Prez didn't answer. He couldn't. He was locked in a staring contest with a 9-year-old boy who had just gambled his last hope on a group of men the world told him to fear. "Please," Leo whispered, his last bit of strength failing. He said he'd kill her this time. He said he was sick of her mouth, and I heard a smack. And then she got real quiet. "Please, it's just down the street. It's 1245 Maple. Please." Prez stood up. He looked at Sarge. He looked at his club, 8 men all watching him, their faces grim. He was their leader. He was supposed to be smart. He was supposed to protect them. Getting involved with a cop, an abusive cop, was a death sentence. He looked back down at the barefoot boy clinging to his leg. He made his choice. "Sarge," Prez said, his voice hard as steel. "You and Rook, stay with the bikes. Watch the gas station. Call the others. Tell them where we are." He turned to the rest of the club. "The rest of you, you're with me." He looked down at Leo. "You're gonna have to run, son. Can you run?" Leo, seeing the first glimmer of hope, nodded, his eyes wide. "Then run," Prez commanded. "Show us the way." The Royal Kings didn't mount their bikes. They left them. They followed the barefoot boy, a phalanx of leather and muscle, melting into the shadows. They were breaking every rule of survival they had ever known, all because a child had told them a truth that no one else would believe. They were a legion of unlikely and very, very angry angels, and they were walking straight into the lion's den. Maple Street was not a home. It was a scar. The 6 bikers, Prez, Sarge, and 4 others, moved like a shadow army, a mass of black leather and muscle, following the small barefoot boy. Leo was running on pure adrenaline, his small feet, now cut and bleeding, barely touching the cracked, weed-choked sidewalk. He didn't look back. He just ran, his entire being focused on the one, desperate hope that these strangers, these terrifying lion-like men, were the answer. The houses on this street were forgotten. Skeletons of what they once were. Peeling paint, boarded-up windows, and yards full of rust and weeds. "Prez," Sarge whispered, his voice a low growl, "this is a trap. This has got to be a trap. We're walking into an ambush." "Maybe," Prez said, his eyes fixed on the small boy's back. "But look at him, man. You think he's lying?" Leo finally stopped, his chest heaving, his small hand pointing at the darkest house on the block. Number 1245. It was a small bungalow-style home, but it was sick. The porch sagged as if it had given up. The yard was a jungle of knee-high grass. Every window was dark, except for one, which glowed with the cold blue flickering light of a television. And the front door was ajar. It hung open, just a few inches, like a mouth waiting to swallow them. As they approached, the sounds from inside the house spilled out into the night. It wasn't just a man's voice. It was the thud of something heavy hitting drywall. A high-pitched, feminine cry of pain. A crash, like glass breaking. Leo froze on the bottom step, his bravery finally breaking. He turned, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it made Sarge's blood run cold. He's. The boy whimpered. Prez put a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. You stay here, he commanded, his voice a low, protective rumble. He motioned to two of his men. Hawk Tank, you stay with the kid. You don't let anything touch him. You understand. They nodded, positioning themselves in front of Leo like a human shield. Prez looked at Sarge. No more words were needed. They moved up the sagging steps. The wood groaned under their combined weight. Prez didn't knock. He put one boot on the door and pushed it open. The smell hit them first. Stale beer, cigarettes, and the metallic coppery scent of fear. The living room was a disaster. Fast food bags, empty bottles, and overturned furniture were scattered everywhere. The only light came from the TV, which was blaring a mindless game show, the fake laughter a grotesque soundtrack to the horror. And in the center of the room, they saw it. A man. A large white man, his face purple with rage, his shirt, a stained wife-beater, dark with sweat. He had a woman, Leo's mother, pinned against the far wall with one forearm. Her face was bruised, her lips split. She was sobbing, a high, thin, hopeless sound. You stupid. The man slurred, his other hand raised to strike again. Hey. Sarge's voice was not a word. It was a force. It was the sound of a grizzly bear, and it stopped the man's hand mid-air. The man, Officer Ken Price, turned. His eyes were blurry with alcohol and adrenaline. When he saw two massive black men, dressed in the full intimidating cuts of a motorcycle club, standing in his living room, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered aggression. Who the hell are you? He spat, shoving the woman aside. She crumpled to the floor, a broken, discarded thing. Price's hand, trained by years of instinct, went straight to his hip. Sarge tensed, his own hand moving, ready for the gun, ready for the war. Prez put a calming hand on his arm. Easy, Sarge. But Price didn't pull a gun. His clumsy, drunken fingers fumbled with his belt. He pulled out a worn black leather wallet and flipped it open. A silver badge glittered in the cold light of the television. Officer Ken Price, he slurred, a triumphant, ugly smirk spreading across his face. City police. And you too are in a world of trouble. The blood drained from Prez's face. He finally, truly, understood. He's one of them. You broke into my house, Price said, savoring each word. He was untouchable, and he knew it. That's trespassing. That's home invasion. I could shoot you both right now. Self-defense. Stand my ground. And the call would be good. He laughed, a wet, choking sound. You think I give a damn about your little biker gang? I am the law in this city. You are nothing. From the floor, the woman, Nina, pushed her hair out of her bloody face. She saw Prez and Sarge, these two giants standing in her living room. And she saw her son, Leo, peering around the doorframe, his small face a mask of terror. She saw the badge in Price's hand. And she saw the choice these men were facing. They could leave. They should leave. But then, Price turned back to her, his eyes full of murder. You did this, he whispered. You called your thugs. I'm going to kill you. That's when she made her choice. She looked past her abuser, her eyes locking with Prez's. Please, she whispered, her voice broken. He's going to kill me. He told me, if I ever left, if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me. And he'd kill my son. Please. It was the whisper that sealed it. Prez and Sarge exchanged a single dark, knowing look. They finally understood the true horrifying depth of the crisis. The 911 call that never came. The 20-minute delay. The dismissal. It wasn't negligence. It was a cover-up. It was a promise. The system wasn't coming. The system was already here. They hadn't just walked into a domestic dispute. They had walked into a conspiracy. They were the only witnesses. And the man holding the badge was the man holding all the power. A voice called from the darkness. It wasn't a question. It was a casual, bored drawl. Ken? You in there, buddy? You called for a cleanup. Officer Ken Price's entire body changed. The drunken, raging monster dissolved, replaced instantly by a man who had just found his backup. His face, which was pale with the adrenaline of his confrontation with Prez, now flushed with triumphant, arrogant relief. He was safe. The system was here. In here, boys. Price yelled, his voice suddenly theatrically shaky, like a bad actor. Thank God. They broke in. I think they got a weapon. A weapon. Prez's blood turned to ice. It was a setup. The classic, final, and often fatal word. Weapon. The front door, which Prez and Sarge had entered, was kicked wide open. Two cops stood silhouetted in the doorway, their flashlights blinding. They weren't the Iron Riders that had responded to a child's cry. They were officers. They were Price's colleagues. And their arrival was not a rescue. It was an occupation. Their names were Officer Miller and Officer Riley. And they were here to take care of their friend. Police. Miller shouted, his voice a drill sergeant's bark. Don't move. Hands. The two cops' eyes scanned the room, bypassing the shattered glass, bypassing the weeping, bruised woman on the floor, bypassing the terrified, barefoot child hiding behind the door. Their eyes, trained by years of systemic bias, landed on the only thing they registered as a threat. Two large, intimidating black men in motorcycle cuts. Hands up. Now. Get on the fucking ground. Their guns were out in an instant. Two black pistols, aimed center mass. One at Prez. One at Sarge. The reaction was so fast, so violent, so instinctive. It was clear this was the only possible outcome. Easy, Prez said, his voice impossibly calm. He slowly, deliberately, raised his hands high, palms open. We're not the problem. Shut your mouth. Riley barked, his finger tightening on the trigger. On your knees. Both of you. Now. Sarge, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, looked at Prez. Prez just gave a short, sharp nod. Comply. With a groan of disgust, Sarge, a man who had done nothing but answer a child's plea, slowly lowered his massive frame to his knees. Prez did the same. And from behind them, Officer Ken Price smirked. He was in complete control. He walked over to his colleagues, rubbing his arm, putting on a show. Told you I'd handle it, boys, he said, his voice full of fake gratitude. These animals, they just busted in here. I was just trying to protect my family. They came right at me. Animals. The word hung in the air, a poisonous, calculated slur. This was the moment of absolute horrifying clarity. The bikers were now in an impossible, fatal standoff. They were being framed in real time by a corrupt system that had no interest in the truth. The real victims, Nina and Leo, were completely and utterly ignored. From the floor, Nina, the bruised mother, finally found her voice. No, she whispered, her voice raw. No, you're wrong. He was hitting me. They saved me. Officer Miller didn't even look at her. He kept his gun trained on Prez. Ma'am, we'll take your statement in a minute, he said, his voice a dismissive, patronizing drone. Right now, we're securing the scene. Securing the scene. By aiming their guns at the only two men who had done anything right. Leo. Nina screamed, as the boy, seeing his saviors on their knees, ran to his mother's side. Leo, stay back. This was the ultimate nightmare. The 911 call had worked. But it wasn't a call for help. It was a call for backup. For the abuser. Prez, on his knees, his hands high in the air, knew he had only seconds. He could feel the cold, electric potential for violence in the room. He knew that one wrong move, one flicker of his eyes, would be all the justification Officer Miller needed. Listen to me, Prez said, his voice low and steady. We're not here to make trouble. A little boy, that little boy, ran to us for help. He said that man. He nodded at Price, was hurting his mother. Shut up. Miller screamed. I said, shut your mouth. You don't get to talk. You're trespassing. You're interfering. And you're about 2 seconds from a resisting arrest charge. The lead cop, Miller, stepped forward, his gun still up, his eyes cold and dead. He was the enforcer. He was the blue line made flesh. He looked down at Prez, a look of utter final contempt on his face. You've got 3 seconds to get your ass up and leave. Get your crew, and get the hell off this block. And if I ever see you here again, I'm taking you all in. Am I clear? Prez was frozen. It was the perfect trap. An impossible, no-win scenario. If they left, as the cop was ordering them to do, they would be abandoning Nina and Leo. They would be leaving a battered woman and her terrified child alone in a house, with a monster who had just been given permission by his own colleagues to do whatever he wanted. The system had just sanctioned the abuse. But if they stayed? If they refused? Prez could see it in their eyes. They wanted him to refuse. They were itching for it. If they stayed, they'd be arrested. They'd be beaten. Or, God forbid, they'd be shot. And the headline would read, 2 armed bikers killed resisting arrest in home invasion. Price would be a hero. Prez looked past the gun. He saw Nina on the floor, clutching her son. Her face, which had held a flicker of hope when he and Sarge walked in, was now a mask of absolute, final and soul-crushing despair. She had just watched her last, best hope get brought to its knees by the very men who were supposed to protect her. 3 seconds. That was the choice. 3 seconds to decide between an abandonment that would haunt him forever, or a martyrdom that would end his life. Officer Miller's gun was steady. His eyes were dead. He wanted this. He was counting down. 3. Prez, on his knees, his hands high in the air, looked past the barrel of the gun. He saw Nina, the bruised mother, who had just watched her last hope be extinguished. He saw her shut her eyes, a silent surrender. He saw Leo, the barefoot boy, who had risked everything to get them, now realizing he had failed. 2. Sarge, kneeling beside him, was vibrating with a rage so profound he was shaking. He was ready to die. He was ready to lunge, to take at least one of them with him. Prez, Sarge growled, a sound like an earthquake. Don't. 1. Prez moved. But not in the way they expected. He let out a long, slow breath. A breath of resignation. A breath of defeat. You're right, Prez said, his voice quiet, all the fight gone. You're right, officer. We're in the wrong. We'll leave. The effect was instantaneous. Officer Miller's face, which was a mask of tense aggression, now relaxed, breaking into a smug, victorious smirk. Officer Riley chuckled. He'd won. Even Sarge looked at Prez, his face a mask of shocked betrayal. What? See. Price slurred from behind them, laughing. Even these animals learn a trick. We'll get out of your hair, Prez continued, his hands still high. We have to make one call first. Club policy. We gotta let our guys know we're clear. It was the most pathetic, weak-sounding request. And the cops loved it. Officer Miller actually laughed. A short, sharp, barking sound. A phone call? You want to call someone? What are you gonna do, call your mommies? Just one call, Prez said, his eyes on the floor. Then we're gone. Miller sighed, drunk on his own power. He lowered his gun, just an inch. Fine. Make it fast. I want you off my street. Slowly, carefully, Prez lowered one hand. He reached into his leather vest. The cops tensed again, their guns snapping back up. Just my phone, Prez said, his voice shaking with fake fear. He pulled out his phone. And he turned it, screen first, so all 3 cops could see it. It wasn't on the call screen. It was on Facebook Live. A bright red live icon was blinking in the top corner. Next to it, a small eye icon with a number, 4.8K. 4,800 people were watching. Prez's finger, still in view of the phone's camera, tapped the speakerphone icon. The phone was already dialing. What the hell is that? Miller snapped, his smugness vanishing, replaced by a cold, sudden flicker of confusion. The phone clicked. A woman's voice, sharp, professional, and full of authority, filled the silent room. Mr. Damaris, this better be important. Prez, still on his knees, still with a gun in his face, spoke clearly. Ma'am. It's Elijah Damaris. From the Royal Kings. The abusive cop, Price, was frozen. The other 2 officers, Miller and Riley, looked at each other, their faces now pale. Damaris? You told me, Prez continued, his voice steady, that if I ever saw exactly this, if I ever saw a brother in blue covering for another brother in blue, I was to call you. No matter the time. The woman's voice on the phone was ice. "Where are you, Elijah?" "I'm at 1245 Maple Street. I'm on my knees. I have 2 officers aiming their service weapons at my head. They are protecting an off-duty officer who has just beaten this woman bloody." He tilted his phone, so the camera could see Nina's bruised face. "And yes, ma'am," Prez said, "it's all on video. The whole thing. The threat. The cover-up. It's been live-streaming for the last 10 minutes. To the private club page, just like you suggested." The woman's voice was final. "I've seen it. I'm watching it right now. So are my investigators. Stay there. Do not move." The line clicked off. Officer Price, now sober, was shaking. "Who the fuck was that? Who did you call?" Miller and Riley still had their guns up, but they weren't aiming them with confidence anymore. They were aiming them out of pure, animal panic. "Time's up." Miller screamed, his voice cracking. "I said get out." "I can't," Prez said, a small cold smile finally touching his lips. "She told me not to move." "What?" And then they heard it. It wasn't a siren. That was their sound. This was a new sound. It was the sound of multiple engines, coming in hot. Headlights flooded the house, washing out the blue of the TV. 3 black, unmarked Ford Explorers, and most terrifyingly of all, a news van, screeched to a halt in front of the house, blocking the entire street. "What the hell? What is this?" Riley whispered, his gun hand trembling. The doors flew open. But it wasn't a SWAT team. It was a woman. A tall, no-nonsense, black woman in a sharp pantsuit. District Attorney Nia Adebayo. She was flanked by 2 stone-faced men in suits. She strode past the cops on the porch. She walked right into the living room, right into the middle of the standoff. She didn't look at Price. She didn't look at Miller. She didn't look at Riley. She walked straight to the man on his knees, and she looked down at him with a look of profound, respectful anger. "Mr. Damaris," she said, her voice ringing with an authority that shattered the room. "You can get up now." Prez and Sarge stood up. Only then did DA Adebayo turn to the 3 cops. Her face was a mask of cold, constitutional fury. "Officer Miller. Officer Riley. You are both in violation of Federal Code 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Officer Price, you're under arrest for aggravated assault, domestic battery, and, let's see, kidnapping." "You can't." Price stammered. This is my house." "You're right," Adebayo said. "And Mr. Damaris's livestream, which my entire team has been watching for 10 minutes, just provided me with a plain view warrant. Thank you for the excellent evidence of your colleagues obstructing a criminal investigation, in real time." The news cameras, now at the door, exploded in a supernova of flashes. Miller and Riley, their faces crumpled in total, abject defeat, finally lowered their weapons. They had been caught. They had been exposed. The system had just been hijacked. And the man who did it was the one they had just called an animal. What happened next was not just an arrest. It was an earthquake. District Attorney Nia Adebayo did not wait. She did not negotiate. She was a surgeon who had just been given a scalpel and a green light. "My investigators have the video," she announced, her voice so loud it seemed to shake the broken house. "The livestream, which 4,867 people were watching, has been secured as evidence. Officer Price, you are under arrest for aggravated assault, domestic battery, and kidnapping. Officers Miller and Riley, you are both under arrest for obstruction of justice and deprivation of rights under color of law. You can't do this." Miller shrieked, his authority gone, his voice now a pathetic, terrified squeal. We're on duty. This is. Get your hands off me." Price roared, reverting to pure, animal rage. It was useless. DA Adebayo's plainclothes investigators, who were not part of the local precinct's blue line, swarmed in. Cuffs were produced. The click of the ratchet was the sound of a 100-year-old system breaking. The news cameras, which Adebayo had clearly tipped off, surged forward. The flashbulbs were a blinding supernova, capturing the unimaginable scene: 3 white police officers, one in a stained t-shirt, being cuffed and perp-walked out of a house, by the very men they had been threatening. Prez and Sarge stood to the side, silent, their hands no longer in the air, but crossed. They were a wall of leather, guarding the doorway where Nina and Leo were huddled, watching their nightmare finally end. By 10 p.m., the story was not just on the local news. It was the local news. Bikers expose corrupt cops. Live stream takedown, the call 911 ignored. DA launches Blue Line probe. The city exploded. The Royal Kings, a club of black men, had long been feared by the city's wealthy and dismissed by its police. Now they were on every channel, being hailed as heroes. Prez, Elijah Damaris, was interviewed live on the scene, the red and blue lights of honest cop cars now flooding the street. He stood there, calm, his voice resonating with a power that had nothing to do with a motorcycle. "We're not heroes," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We just answered a call the police ignored. This family needed help. This boy, this brave Barefoot boy, he asked for help. We just listened. The real question is, why was a 9-year-old kid so terrified to call 911? That he ran to us. That single line, why did he run to us?" became the question that shocked the city. DA Adebayo used the biker's video and Prez's testimony as a digital battering ram. It wasn't just about price. It was about the culture. The 911 dispatch logs were pulled. They proved Leo's first call, 20 minutes before he found the bikers, had been received, and marked low priority, likely domestic. The investigation was swift and brutal. DA Adebayo, now backed by a furious public, launched a full-scale probe into the precinct. The police chief was forced to resign. Miller and Riley were fired and indicted. Officer Ken Price, facing a mountain of video evidence and his colleagues all taking deals to testify against him, was sentenced to 20 years. The blue line that had protected him, that had ignored the cries of Nina and Leo, had been shattered by the rumble of 8 motorcycles. But for the Royal Kings, the story wasn't over. The news trucks eventually left. The politicians gave their speeches. The city moved on. The Royal Kings stayed. They adopted Leo and his mother Nina. They did not just save them, they rebuilt them. The day after the arrest, Sarge, Hawk, and Rook were seen at 1245 Maple, not in their cuts, but in tool belts. They replaced the broken door. They patched the drywall Price had smashed. They put new heavy-duty locks on all the windows. They set up a 24/7 watch on the house, daring any of Price's other friends to come near. They stocked the fridge. They used the club's benevolence fund, money usually saved for funerals, to pay Nina's overdue bills, to get her into therapy for the trauma, and to move her, Leo, and his younger sister, Maya, into a new, safe, and undisclosed apartment across town, where the ghost of Ken Price couldn't find them. This was the real work. 3 months later, Prez stood in the Royal Kings clubhouse. He pointed to a stack of letters, a pile of DMs on their social media. "They're calling us," he said, his voice quiet. The room went silent. Since the story, they haven't stopped. Other women. Other kids. People who are trapped in their own 1245 Maple. People who are too afraid of the cops to call 911. He looked at Sarge. He looked at his club. "We exposed a wound, brothers," he said. "A deep systemic wound. And if we don't help them, who will?" That night, the Royal Shield program was born. It wasn't just a hotline. It was a promise. It was a 24/7 network of safe houses, pro bono lawyers, and a rapid response team of ex-military members, the bikers themselves, who would physically stand guard, who would be the witnesses the system couldn't ignore. They became the city's real first responders. The Royal Kings, once the outlaws, had become the guardians. 1 year later, the club held its annual charity ride. In the past, they were lucky if a few dozen people showed up. This year, 5,000 people flooded the streets to cheer them on. The mayor gave them a key to the city. Prez rode at the front of the convoy. But he wasn't alone. Sitting in front of him, wearing a tiny custom-made Royal Kings vest, was Leo. He wasn't barefoot. He was wearing brand new boots. And he wasn't crying. He was laughing. They were no longer the men the city feared. They were the men the city trusted. They had proved that true justice sometimes comes on 2 wheels, not 4.
Share this story if you believe that true heroes are the ones who show up when the rest of the world looks away. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of community. And subscribe to Black Lives Story, because sometimes, to fix a broken system, you have to be brave enough to build your own.